Well, I did not have any Red Bull. So, how many people know what the theme is today? Come on.
Impossible. Impossible.
I'm possible. All right, well, the theme today, if you have not been living under a rock, is I'm possible. And in a time and place when so many things seem impossible, just by a mere adding of an apostrophe, we not only change the word, but the meaning of the word. And so we go from impossible to possible, from hopeless to hopeful. And so, wouldn't that be easy if the world operated that way? And I'm here today to tell you that the world can operate that way. That if all of us came from the point of I'm possible, the change in this world could be extraordinary. I'm going to take you on a little journey.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Yes.
Speaking of possible.
Possibly, can't you hear me?
Possibly can't hear you. This right here. So it's okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you all hear me?
Yep.
I'm still going to take you on a journey. Close your eyes. No peeking. Okay? Breathe in the fresh tropical air. Listen to the birds singing. Take in the beautiful countryside, nestled between the Zambezi and the Limpopo rivers. You can hear an old car noisily going by. You can also hear the honk of a horn and a banana trader shouting out today's banana prices. And the smell these unfamiliar smells. And then, oh, wait, a familiar one. Fresh baked bread. Now, as your taste buds begin to salivate, you look out over the horizon past the lush trees, and you see a cornucopia of colors shooting across the sky. It's a sunrise. And what an incredible sunrise. Open your eyes. You can open your eyes. You have landed in Harare, Zimbabwe. How many know where Zimbabwe is? Okay. You're on a bus. Your window's open, but it doesn't help with the sweltering heat. A fly buzzes past your nose, and annoyingly, you try to swat it, but you miss. And carefully, you take your shorts that are sticking on the plastic seat of the bus, and you pull them up as you arrive at the downtown station. As you exit the bus, the sun shoots in your eyes, and out of the corner of your eyes, you see the tiniest of little toddlers in the corner, kind of cowering by the building. You cautiously go over to her, but an elderly woman actually beats you there, and she gently works with the child. You overhear the woman say the child's name, and she says, Ranyarado. Ranyarado. And you look in little Ranyarado's face. You focus on her face. And the innocence and beauty of that child takes your breath away. You later find out that this 2-year-old had been raped and abandoned at the train station. That elderly lady who assisted her took her to a shelter where they could help children who've been raped or abused. Now, travel 2,000 miles north to another little girl. She has blonde hair and big brown eyes and an infectious laugh. She's dressed in her Sunday best and smiles all the way to church. Well, after church, her pigtails flying off her shoulders, she runs down to her best friend's house. And looking at that child, you could not imagine that at 7 years old, that child had already been sexually abused by a brother, her father, and a cousin. Now, as she arrived at her girlfriend's house, neither one of them talks about the Friday night sleepover. They had been so excited about that sleepover. So excited, in fact, they couldn't sleep, and they sat chatting and chatting until finally they were so exhausted that they laid their sleeping bags next to each other and fell asleep listening to Elvis Presley tunes. Blood sisters and best friends bonded in trauma that night. As that little girl woke up to hear her best friend pleading, "Stop it, stop it." She closed her eyes and pretended to be asleep. It took her years to forgive herself for that one. She was shattered that she couldn't be there for her best friend. But in that moment, all she wanted to do was to sink in the dirt and disappear. So many of us do that in our lives. We want to sink into the dirt and disappear, and we pretend to be asleep. And when something in life comes at us, it's just too painful to bear. Oops. That little girl was me. And it took me a long time to deal with my family. And when I did, it was very hard for them to cope. Not because they didn't love me. Some got angry. Some supported me, even today. But they responded in a certain way because that's the only way they knew how. And again, it wasn't because they didn't love me. It wasn't because they didn't want to be there for me. It's because sometimes in life, some things are truly almost unbearable. In fact, unbearable. So, how did I turn my life into a message of courage and light? One thing never left my mind in the long process of healing. I refused to be defined by what happened to me. I wanted my life to be about how I thrived and rose above those events. Because in the end, that's all you have. My abuse when I was a kid was a defining moment for me, as was my arrest and incarceration in a Zimbabwe prison. I had first met little Ranyarado when I traveled to Zimbabwe to document the story of Betty Michealene, a top 10 CNN hero and an amazing human being, also a survivor. Betty founded the Girl Child Network, which rescues kids and provides shelter for those who've been raped and abused. She fights every day against a myth that's been propagated in Zimbabwe and in many parts of the world, particularly Africa, that if a man is taught that if he rapes a virgin, he will cure his AIDS. The youngest victims have been one-day-olds. So, after a week of filming, Betty and my assistant, first job out of college, and I were arrested by 15 Central Intelligence agents. They arrested us for operating as journalists without a license. These were bogus charges by the dictator Robert Mugabe and his thugs who wanted to scare us and wanted to make sure that we did not tell the story outside of Zimbabwe. The prison was co-ed, overcrowded. There was no food or water. I used American dollars to bribe the guards so that we avoided the holding pen, which was just a large room full of feces and urine. But yet, One of the most poignant moments of that trip and of my life was when I sat in a 5x5 cell with 7 other women. As we shivered from the cold, each of these women shared their story, and each story more horrific than the last. One woman was so beaten by her husband, she carried photos around so that you could see how savagely she was beaten. She was unrecognizable in the photos, but she went to prison. Another woman, so distraught, she was using an asthma inhaler, and in between puffs, she worried about her 3 children, alone and vulnerable, while she was in prison for border jumping, so she could get something, anything, for her kids to eat. Halfway through these stories, I began to weep. And there's a woman there who's kind of the ringleader of the group, and she looked at me quizzically and she said, "Why do you weep?" And I said, "I weep for you, for your lives." And she looked at me with complete and utter lack of understanding. She had no idea what I was talking about. And what you need to know is these women have such little expectations for their lives. And in that moment, I had clarity like I'd never felt before. And I realized that my mission, my responsibility in life, was to give voice to those who've been silenced, for human beings who've been too damaged, and for those who've not found their voice yet. That was my mission. And how lucky I am. I'm possible because all those events that happened to me as a child were just that, a series of events, and they did not define who I am as a human being. And with that new responsibility as a voice for the silenced, if these women were standing here in front of you, they would say this: we women are half the whole, a critical component of the balance in the world. We are being raped, abused, beaten, and in some parts of the world, completely annihilated. You know, sometimes when I think about this, I think of my mother, and I think of her gentle touch, her warm embrace, a loving good night, and I have to ask this question: what would the world be like without women? What would our world be like without women? The war against women, or the war against us, would not only destroy women, but it would destroy the human species. Today, I'm possible. I am a wife. I am a mother. I am a woman. My 3 boys are possible because my husband and I teach them how to learn to respect women. We are all possible if we teach our children that whether they're a boy or a girl, that they each have individual traits and gifts, and that they both deserve our love. We are all possible if we start educating ourselves and stopping politicians from destroying our freedoms and using politics as political gain and donor paybacks. We are all possible if we teach our children how to be treated, and when they're not treated properly, tell them what they need to do. I wish I could say to you something that would allow you to wake up and see that we have an epidemic in the world. But the only thing I can do is share my story and hope that you feel something. I stand here in front of you as that little girl who wanted to sink into the dirt and disappear, and I'm still standing. I found my voice, and I speak to you from my heart, and I am hopeful that all of us together can become possible for change in all of us, each and every one of us, one by one. That's all it takes. And I thank you.